Relics were meant to be quiet. Admiral Saleith of the Galactic Council watched Earth swell on the forward display. A blue-green asset tagged for processing. The file scrolled beside it: industrial lag, kinetic reliance, atmospheric confinement, humans. A species catalogued late and corrected gently. 67 vessels clustered above the planet, crude silhouettes wrapped in reflective armor like ceremonial plating. Saleith allowed a faint expansion of her crest. The galaxy's audience feeds were already live. Begin administrative phase, she ordered, voice even. No spectacle. 10,000 council ships aligned across 12 planes, elegant arcs of light forming a containment lattice at 420,000 kilometers. The numbers comforted her, ratios mattered. 10,000 to 6. It was not a battle. It was sanitation. The humans had been given terms: compliance, disarmament, labor allocation. They had responded with a single transmission requesting evacuation corridors for civilians. As if negotiations still existed, primitive thinking persisted. Longest in relic cultures, Saleith authorized the opening demonstration. Forward emitters discharged in synchronized bands, violet energy washing across the human formation. On her console, projections predicted hull breach in 4.2 seconds, total neutralization in under 3 minutes. She narrated calmly for the observers. Containment doctrine, minimal loss, efficient correction. This was how order was maintained without anger. Without excess. The first volley struck. No breach registered. Data blinked once. Then again, impact graphs flattened, absorption curves climbing where they should have collapsed. Saleith's aides leaned closer as efficiency metrics populated in sterile white numerals. 91%. Then 94, then stabilizing at 97.4. No secondary flares. No venting debris. The human ships remained exactly where they were. A minor anomaly, Saleith told herself. Layered armor, perhaps? An old trick scaled poorly. Repeat fire, she said. The second volley vanished more cleanly than the first. Silence crept across the command deck, broken only by the soft tick of counters, updating. 0 penetration, 0 casualties. The humans did not return fire. They did not maneuver. They simply endured. As if endurance itself were the point being made. One of the feeds caught a human transmission leaking through open channels. Calm and unadorned. Energy intake, nominal. All vessels green. Saleith felt the first edge of irritation. Relics were supposed to panic. They were supposed to beg or lash out. These ones absorbed punishment and spoken status reports. She flagged the anomaly for later review and straightened, unwilling to grant it weight. Escalate output by 12%, she said. Maintain formation integrity. If correction required firmness, firmness would be applied. Around Earth, 10,000 ships adjusted their aim, confident and precise. The galaxy watched an administrator at work, certain that inevitability still belonged to the Council. It had not yet occurred to Saleith that the humans were still measuring. They answered the surrender demand with questions. The Council's ultimatum, pulsed across open bands, translated into 47 languages, and formatted for compliance. Disarm. Power down. Prepare for processing. Admiral Saleith watched the timer count down from 300 seconds, a courtesy extended only to developing species. At 112 seconds remaining, a new signal appeared: tight beam, narrowcast, deliberately inefficient. Human origin. The audio came first, steady and unhurried. Galactic Council Fleet. This is the United Terran Command. We acknowledge receipt. No flinching. No deference. Saleith inclined her head. You are in violation of Council Directive 7. State your acceptance. There was a pause of exactly 3 seconds. Not a delay. A measure. We refuse surrender, the human voice said. We are requesting immediate civilian evacuation corridors from Earth, lunar, and orbital habitats. 20 million non-combatants will begin transit within 6 minutes. The bridge murmured. Saleith felt something colder than irritation. The human spoke as if authority were shared. As if outcomes were negotiable. Your request is denied, she replied. Evacuation complicates processing efficiency. Compliance will ensure correction, the human interrupted, tone unchanged. Evacuation is non-negotiable. Corridors will be honored under interstellar civilian protection norms. Any interference will be logged as a war crime. A single line of text accompanied the transmission. Legal bases attached. Citations followed counsel. Precedents, dormant treaties, clauses Scythe had not reviewed in decades. Relics, studying law. The absurdity tightened her crest. You presume jurisdiction, Scythe said. You possess none. Another pause. 3 seconds again. We are? Not presuming, the human replied. We are informing. Standalone lines flashed across. Secondary feeds as observers clipped the exchange. No surrender offered. No plea issued. Scythe authorized a display of authority. You are outnumbered 10,000 to 67. Your energy defenses will fail. Under sustained fire, your population centers are mapped to the meter. We are aware of the ratio, the human said. We calculated it at first contact. We are also aware of your firing solutions. That is why we are asking ones for civilian release. As if granting mercy were an administrative step. Refusal stands, Scythe said. Final warning. The response came immediately. Then understand our terms. Civilians are not targets. Prisoners will be taken. Medical aid will be rendered after surrender. Command personnel will face trial. This is your notice. Trial. The word carried weight even stripped of theater. Scythe scanned the tactical board. The humans still had not moved. 67 ships held position inside a containment lattice, meant to crush them. Their confidence read as procedural, not emotional. A junior aide whispered casualty projections. If evacuation were allowed, 20 million lives would escape the correction cycle. Resources lost. Time wasted. Scythe silenced the aide with a gesture. You mistake restraint for weakness, she said. No, the human replied. We are demonstrating it. Another clean line for the feeds. We don't negotiate civilians. The timer expired. Across Earth's orbit, human vessels adjusted. Their orientation by fractions of a degree, aligning with emerging transit vectors. Evacuation beacons activated in sequence 1-2. 12 broadcasting corridors the Council had not approved. Scythe cut the channel. Her voice remained level, but the word administrative no longer fit comfortably in her thoughts. This was no longer a correction request being refused, it was a refusal being documented, line by line before consequences were applied. The firing order was logged as routine. Admiral Scythe authorized full-spectrum discharge across all arcs. Escalation. Tier 3. 10,000 emitters synchronized, their phase offsets calculated to overwhelm any layered defense. The galaxy's feeds brightened as lances of coherent energy crossed 420,000 kilometers in under a second. This was correction made visible. Impact. The human formation vanished behind a white glare. Observers leaned forward. Counters waited to spike. They did not. Telemetry returned first, unadorned and merciless. Absorption curves rose smoothly, then leveled. Dissipation fields bloomed across human hulls like heat haze, shunting energy laterally and bleeding it into structured wakes. Numbers populated the display with bureaucratic indifference. Absorption efficiency, 96.8%. Thermal load redistribution. Nominal hole penetration, 0.0%. Zero penetration. A second wave followed before Scythe spoke. A redundancy reflex. The glare returned, stronger, tuned across frequencies meant to bypass reflection and brute force through mass. Again, the light faded. Again, the human ships remained, armor darkened, but intact. Formation unchanged. The counters updated. Absorption efficiency stabilized at 97.4%. Internal damage reports, none. Casualties, 0. A standalone line cut across the observer feeds. Clipped from an open human channel. Energy intake nominal. Scythe's mandibles tightened. Increase output by 20%. Focus fire on the lead vessel. 10,000 beams converged on a single human ship, a slab-sided craft with no visible ornamentation. The weapon cameras zoomed, hungry for fracture. The ship's surface flared once, then dimmed. Excess energy vented aft, in controlled plumes. Blue-white arcs shedding. Into space like disciplined exhaust, the lead vessel did not break formation. Another human transmission slipped through. Quieter this time. Recommend we keep letting them burn their capacitors. Burn their capacitors. On the council bridge, aides spoke in clipped bursts. Capacitor drain rates. Appeared council emitters, cycling hotter, recharge intervals stretching by seconds. Then tens of seconds. The humans were not just surviving the fire. They were tracking it. Measuring it, Soleil felt the room's confidence thin. Energy weapons were doctrine. They ended wars before they began. Kinetics were a relic indulgence, inefficient and crude. Yet the data refused to conform. A third escalation followed, unauthorized. By protocol but necessary to reassert inevitability. Exotic bands, rare frequencies, power levels that made the deck plates hum. The result did not change. Zero penetration. Another clean line surfaced on the feeds, still green. Soleil ordered a pause. The firing stopped, not from mercy, but from arithmetic. 10,000 ships cooled and recharged, their perfect lattice momentarily static. Across the void, 67 human vessels floated inside the kill zone, unmarked. Patient observers began whispering words usually reserved for myths, immunity, adaptation, preparation. Soleil stared at the tactical board and understood, too late, that the humans had not been asking for evacuation corridors to buy time. They had been offering the council a chance to stop wasting it. Acceleration began without warning. One moment, the human ships were static points inside the lattice, 67 signatures suspended and patient. The next, their vectors changed. Not evasive. Intentional. Admiral Salatha's board flashed as velocity indicators climbed past civilian tolerances. Past military norms. Past anything Council doctrine recognized as sustainable. 6G, 810-12G burn, an aid. Whispered, disbelief creeping in despite training. The human formation did not scatter. It folded. Ships slid into precise lanes, angles measured in fractions of a degree, thrust vectors interlocking like machinery. Where Council fleets prized elegant spacing and overlapping fields, the humans carved corridors through geometry itself. 67 arrows aimed inward. Distance collapsed fast. 400,000 kilometers became 3. 3 became 1. At 12G, closing speed rewrote engagement math. Fire control solutions recalculated and failed. Predictive arcs lagging. Behind acceleration curves that refused to plateau. Soleil snapped orders. Reform lattice. Compress planes. Maintain spacing. Too late. The Council formation was built for dominance at range energy fields. Overlapping kill zones. Time to cycle emitters. It was not built to be invaded. As human ships crossed the inner boundary, Council vessels were forced to maneuver, breaking symmetry to avoid collision. The lattice warped standalone lines began appearing across the feeds, clipped and shared. 12G. Sustained. Human ships threaded gaps, measured in meters, not kilometers. Their armor glowed dully under residual heat, radiators flaring and dimming in rhythm. Inside, crews endured forces that would pulp unaugmented bodies. No chatter leaked. No distress calls, just numbers. Council escorts attempted to interpose, firing as they turned. The shots missed. At these distances, at these speeds, prediction failed faster than computers could compensate. Human ships passed through fields of light like knives through smoke. Soleil watched formations unravel. 10,000 vessels became clusters, then clumps, then liabilities. Each evasive correction opened another gap. Each gap became an invitation. Why are they not breaking? An aide asked. Because they were not closing to threaten, they were closing to decide. A human transmission cut through. Broadcast wide and calm. We are entering effective range. Ceasefire and designate surrender lanes. Effective range. The phrase echoed with uncomfortable implication. Punchlines hit the feeds in sequence. They're inside the math. Doctrine collapse. Council captains tried to reassert control, issuing conflicting orders as proximity alarms flared. At 50,000 kilometers, then 30, then 10, the humans adjusted again. Microburns, snapping them into attack geometry that ignored traditional fronts and rears. There was no single axis to defend. Salath felt inevitability slip from her grasp. Acceleration had become a weapon, wielded with restraint and precision. The humans were not chasing kills. They were dismantling the board. Casualty projections spiked not from fire, but from collision risk, from failed maneuvers. From ships forced into each other's paths by sudden vacuum where order had been. 37 Council vessels. Sheared shields avoiding a human cruiser that never altered course. Another clean human. Line surfaced. Recommends surrender while lanes still exist. The implication was surgical. Lanes were temporary. As the last human ship crossed the 10,000-kilometer mark, Solaith understood the deeper violation. Energy had failed. Range had failed. Superiority had failed. What remained was mass, velocity. And crews willing to endure 12G, without hesitation. The Council fleet was no longer an instrument. It was an obstacle being passed. The first shot was not dramatic, it was punctual, at precisely 0 hours, 17 minutes, and 43 seconds, ship time. Every human vessel reached firing geometry within a tolerance of 0.03 degrees. Admiral Solaith did not hear an order given. There was no broadcast declaration. The human ships simply aligned. Their forward sections are rizzing open to reveal long, matte channels recessed deep into armored spines. Kinetics. Obsolete, the Council had said. Magnetic rails charged in silence. Field coils ramping to lethal thresholds in under half a second. On the tactical board, 67 firing solutions locked simultaneously, each tagged to a different Council command node. Flagships, relay core. Fire control hubs. Solaith's flagship registered the threat an instant before impact. Slugs launched. At 0.08C. No warning flare. No energy bloom. Just mass and velocity crossing distance faster than shields were designed to respond. The first Council command vessel ceased to exist 0.6 seconds later. Its core punched through by a tungsten dart that ignored deflection fields and turned structure into expanding vapor. Then the rest followed. 7 flagships died in 43 seconds. The numbers populated in cold sequence. Impact timestamps. Kill confirmations. Crew counts truncated to 0. Shockwaves rippled outward, not from explosions, but from sudden absent ships removed from the board, so cleanly that nearby escorts overcorrected into empty space. Missiles arrived next. Human racks, disgorged waves of compact shapes. Hundreds. Per ship, each on independent vectors. They did not swarm. They sorted. Targeting algorithms paired missiles to systems rather than Hulsingen's emitters. Nuclear signatures flickered and vanished as warheads detonated inside shields. Already compromised by kinetic breach. Punchlines clipped instantly across the feeds. 43 seconds. Command decapitated. Council return fire was sporadic and ineffective. Without centralized coordination, formations fractured further, ships firing on outdated solutions against targets that were no longer there. Human vessels burned through. The chaos, railguns, cycling every 8 seconds, each shot logged. Each result confirmed. Solaith's bridge shuddered as a near miss tore past, the wake alone overloading sensors. Damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Command nodes destroyed. 12. Fire control arrays disabled. 418. Effective combat ships lost. 1,903. Human casualties remained unchanged. Another human transmission cut through. Directed at all Council vessels. Command capability neutralized. Further resistance will increase loss ratios without altering outcome. No taunt. No triumph, just arithmetic. Solaith tasted something like panic for the first time in her career. She ordered localized retreats, but without relays the commands arrived late, or not at all. Ships broke away blindly, only to find human missiles. Adjusting course with patient inevitability, boarding warnings began to appear human craft. Matching velocity alongside crippled Council ships, grapples deploying with mechanical precision. Not yet, Solaith realized. They were choosing not to. Board yet? They were finishing the math. A final railgun volley erased the secondary command ring in 12 seconds. With it went the last coordinated firing solutions. The Council fleet's remaining ships drifted, or fled. Their perfect lattice, now a debris field, measured in thousands of discrete failures. Human ships throttled back. Acceleration dropping from 12G to 3, then to 1. Weapons cooled. Missile launches ceased. Another clean line surfaced, almost gentle. Ceasefire acknowledged on receipt of surrender codes. Casualty counters froze. The humans had stopped exactly when command resistance ended, not when destruction could have continued. The contrast unsettled observers more than the kill shots had. Saleith looked at the board and saw the truth rendered in numbers she could not argue with. The battle had not been won by fury or chance, but by timing, preparation, and a willingness to apply overwhelming force only until it was no longer required. The railguns fell silent. What followed would not be louder, but it would be harder to escape. The broadcasts replaced the noise. Across every open channel, human and council alike. The same signal, asserted periodically carrier. Neutral encoding, impossible to jam without silencing everything else. Admiral Saleith heard it before she saw it. A level human voice, layered with captions and citations. Attention all vessels. Attention all systems observing. This is the United Terran Command. The firing did not resume. Human ships held position. Among drifting wreckage, railguns cold, missiles inert. Casualty counters remained frozen where they had stopped. Council losses measured in thousands, human losses still at 0. This conflict is now governed by Terran articles of war. The voice continued. These articles apply regardless of species, status, or prior conduct. Text scrolled beside the audio, translated in real time. Observers leaned in as clauses unfolded, numbered, and precise. Article 1. Slavery is prohibited. All enslaved persons encountered will be liberated immediately. Article 2. Surrendered combatants are prisoners of war and will not be harmed. Article 3. Medical aid will be rendered without discrimination after hostilities cease. Saleith felt a tightening behind her eyes. Law, asserted not as rhetoric, but as operating system. A second voice joined. Softer, clinical. Current prisoner. Count, 18,312. All receiving life support where required. The number hit harder than any explosion. 18,000 enemies alive because the humans had decided they should be. Another clause followed. Command personnel responsible for civilian targeting, forced labor, or extermination policy will face trial. Evidence collection has begun. Evidence trials. The words carried weight because of what had just been demonstrated. This was not moral pleading from a weaker power. It was procedure announced by a dominant one. Punchlines surfaced across the feeds. Stuck against the wreckage. They stopped. Prisoners alive. Council ships began transmitting surrender codes in uneven bursts. Some delayed, hoping for rescue. Others complied immediately, weapons powering down as human craft adjusted to cover them without firing. Boarding teams launched only after confirmation, moving with restraint that bordered on indifference. Saleith watched as a nearby council cruiser vented atmosphere. Its crew evacuated into human shuttles marked with medical sigils instead of assault markings. The humans did not hurry. They did not threaten. They logged. Compliance acknowledged, the broadcast said, repeating as needed. Maintain current vector. Assistance inbound. Observers across the galaxy reacted in wave shock, disbelief, recalculation. Empires that had relied on terror to enforce obedience now saw a different model executed under fire. Victory, then law. Power, then restraint. A final section of the broadcasts addressed the wider audience. This doctrine is not situational. It is not retaliation. It is policy. Any force operating within Terran protected space will be held to it. Protected space. The phrase expanded outward in listeners' minds. Mapping itself onto star charts, Saleith lowered her crest, not in submission, but in comprehension. The humans had not merely won an engagement. They had imposed a standard, backed by numbers. No one could dismiss as the signal ended. Human ships began organizing holding patterns. Corridors opening not for attack, but for transit medical, evacuation, custody. The battlefield transformed into an administered zone under new rules. The war had paused. Not because violence was exhausted, but because law had taken the field. The realization did not come from the battlefield. It came from the observers. Coalition. Analysts replayed the engagement frame by frame, stripping away shock and spectacle, until only patterns remained. Acceleration profiles were overlaid against known human physiology. Firing solutions were compared to recorded simulations. What emerged was not improvisation under pressure, but familiarity. One analyst spoke first, voice low. These maneuvers aren't reactive. They're rehearsed. Data corroborated it. Human ships had not accelerated at random vectors. They had burned along pre-computed lanes, corridors mapped long before the Council arrived. Their arrival times at firing geometry differed by milliseconds across fleets separated by thousands of kilometers. Synchronization like that required more than skill. It required rehearsal. Archived traffic was pooled. Human logistics movements from decades prior, flagged at the time as civilian freight anomalies. Now reclassified, they told a different story. Fuel depots established at Lagrange points 214 years earlier. Dry docks disguised as asteroid processing arrays, sensor webs woven slowly, legally. Patiently, punchlines began circulating as conclusions hardened. Preparation wasn't recent. Doctrine, older than contact. Coalition historians, cross-referenced human military publications released openly, dismissed at the time as speculative fiction or defensive theory. Kinetic emphasis. Acceleration tolerance. Distributed command. Mercy protocols embedded after dominance. The documents were dated centuries before first contact with the Council. They had been waiting not for this fleet specifically. For any fleet that fit the pattern. Human readiness charts surfaced next, leaked deliberately or by accident, no one could say. Training cycles, measured in decades. Crews rotated through live-fire exercises at 12G, until it became baseline. Railgun kill chains drilled until timing errors fell below 1%. Nothing in the engagement exceeded documented human limits. Observers realized, with a chill, that the humans had fought well within them. A coalition delegate requested clarification. Over open channels, careful now. United Terran Command, confirm. Were these assets pre-positioned before Council incursion? The reply was immediate. Affirmative. Fleet elements were stationed according to contingency planning. How long? The delegate pressed. A pause, not 3 seconds this time. Shorter. Initial deployments began 214 years ago. The number rippled outward. Clipped and shared to 1 for years. Longer than most current empires had existed, Salaith received the same reports. Filtered and brutal. Her fleet had not stumbled into a developing species. It had collided with a civilization that had anticipated conquest as a category and prepared accordingly. Not in secret. In plain sight, under the assumption that no one would take them seriously, the humans had not escalated. They had executed. Coalition strategists recalculated threat models in real time. Human space expanded on their maps, not by declared borders, but by demonstrated reach. If this level of readiness had been achieved quietly, what else had been layered beneath it? Another human transmission answered without being asked. For clarity, this posture is defensive. It exists to prevent repetition. Prevent repetition, not vengeance, not expansion, prevention. As surrender processing continued, prisoners logged, medical teams deployed, observers understood the final insult. Embedded in the battle. The Council had believed itself the teacher, correcting a relic culture. Instead, it had been assessed, categorized, and countered by doctrines older than its own arrogance. Humanity had not risen to meet the threat. It had already been there. Waiting. For the moment when patience would no longer suffice. Neutralization was quieter than destruction, with command nodes gone and doctrine shattered. The remaining Council ships drifted in broken clusters, engines idling or cycling erratically. Human vessels did not rush them. They repositioned with patient precision, forming containment arcs that closed slowly, inexorably, leaving no blind vectors and no sudden shocks. Missiles launched first, not salvos. Messages. Compact waves peeled from human racks, each missile broadcasting identification and intent. They struck engines, power couplings, emitter housings. Never life support, never habitation rings. Detonations were contained, surgical. Ships lost mobility without losing air. Shields collapsed without cascading inward. Council status boards, lit with the same phrase, repeated across hulls: mobility, zero. Weapons, offline. Hull, integrity. Stable. A human transmission followed, identical in tone to the earlier law broadcast. You are disabled. Broadcast surrender codes to receive assistance. Some ships complied immediately. Codes blinked green across human displays, and containment arcs opened into lanes. Human escorts slid alongside, matching velocity within centimeters per second. Docking collars extended. Boarding teams crossed in sealed suits, marked not with unit insignia, but with medical symbols and custody identifiers. Prisoners were logged as they were met. Weapons secured, wounded, stabilized where they lay. The process was efficient enough to be unsettling. Other council vessels hesitated. They tried to flee. Missile waves adjusted. Gentle but absolute. Drives were stripped away in pairs, then trios, until escape vectors collapsed into dead drift. No pursuit followed. Human ships simply waited. Their presence, a constant pressure. Punchlines rippled through the observer feeds. Surrender cascade. Their dismantling, not chasing. Boarding. Actions accelerated. Timers appeared on shared feeds, impossible to ignore. Average boarding duration, 9 minutes. Average injuries during capture, 0.7 per ship, most pre-existing. Fatalities during boarding, 0 at the 30-minute mark. Surrender codes surged. One cluster of 87 council ships powered down in sequence, their captains transmitting compliance within seconds of each other. Another followed. Then, another. 18,000 prisoners became 19. Then 20 Salave's flagship remained among the last active, systems degraded but intact. She watched as human craft took positions off her bow and stern, not aiming. Weapons, simply present. The message was clear without being spoken. You are contained, came the hail. Confirm surrender to proceed. She delayed, scanning the wider battle space. Where there should have been chaos, there was human order imposed over the wreckage of council arrogance. Medical shuttles moved along prescribed routes. Prisoner transports departed on schedule. Casualty counters ticked upward only for those saved. Salathi transmitted her codes. Compliance acknowledged. The human voice replied. Maintain current status. Boarding inbound. As human teams crossed her decks, Salath noted their discipline. No looting. No gestures of triumph. They worked from lists, checking compartments, sealing weapons, tagging evidence. One paused to stabilize an injured council officer before continuing. Missile activity tapered off as the last holdouts powered down. At 90 minutes post-decapitation, resistance effectively ceased. The final count scrolled across coalition channels. Council ships disabled, 9,742. Ships surrendered intact, 8,311. Ships destroyed beyond recovery, 1,431. Human ships lost, 0. The last number drew a collective intake of breath across the galaxy. Human vessels shifted posture again, expanding their formation to encompass the entire engagement zone. What had been a battlefield became a managed volume of space under Terran control. Navigation warnings updated automaticruise. Broadcasting new protocols. Engagement complete, the human command voice announced. All hostile forces neutralized. Custody and care ongoing. No cheers followed. No declarations of glory. Just confirmation that the task assigned had been finished to specification. As the final council ships went dark, observers understood the full meaning of what they had witnessed. This had not been a desperate stand, or a lucky counterstrike. It had been the methodical dismantling of a fleet by a power that considered dominance a prerequisite for mercy. And mercy, a matter of record. Mercy began after the counters stopped. Human custody ships moved through the engagement zone on published routes, their schedules visible to every observer feed. Prisoners were transferred in ordered waves, 18,000 becoming 21,000 as late surrenders were processed. Triage bays filled, then stabilized. Medical drones worked without pause, indifferent to uniform or species. A broadcasts followed, narrower than the earlier law signal, but no less deliberate. All detainees are classified as prisoners of war. Transport to holding facilities will commence within 2 hours. Legal counsel access will be provided. Counsel. The word spread faster than the numbers. Salath was escorted to a holding compartment. that looked nothing like a cell. Gravity was steady. Atmosphere tuned to her physiology. A human medic checked her vitals without comment and left a data slate within reach. On it, a schedule. Preliminary hearing, 36 hours. Evidence disclosure, complete. Trial date, pending jurisdictional coordination. Trial, not interrogation, not summary judgment. A standalone line surged across the feeds. They're scheduling justice. Across neighboring systems, reaction shifted from shock to calculation. Merchant enclaves that had lived under council levy protocols transmitted inquiries quiet at first, then public. Border polities requested clarification of Terran articles of war. Some sent observers, others sent formal notices of withdrawal. From council authority, citing civilian protection failures logged during the battle, defection counts appeared on coalition channels. Systems renouncing. Council oversight, 4, then 11, then 2, 3. Human diplomats did not rush to claim them. They responded with the same language used on the battlefield measured, procedural. Terran protection applies upon request and ratification of civilian norms. No tribute required. No tribute. Another punchline hit. Stark and shareable. Power. Without tribute, prisoner transfers continued. Human officers documented everything, timestamps, conditions, consent. Evidence teams catalogued wreckage, pulling data cores and command logs from disabled council ships. The process was transparent by design. Observers were invited to watch. Salaith reviewed the charges listed against her with professional clarity. Civilian endangerment. Forced labor authorization. Command responsibility. Each item cited council precedents and interstellar law she had once helped draft. The irony was sharp, but clean. Outside custody zones, human ships escorted evacuation. Convoys from Earth's orbit, 20 million civilians cleared along corridors that had been denied hours earlier. Transit times and arrival confirmations scrolled live. Not one transport was delayed. The galaxy noticed. Political gravity shifted not with proclamations, but with logistics. Trade routes adjusted toward Terran-secured lanes. Neutral worlds requested. Arbitration services. Even long-aligned council partners began hedging, their statements careful, their language changing. Human Command issued a final note to observers. These proceedings will be public. Verdicts will be enforced. Appeals will be heard. No threats followed. None were needed. Salaith looked through the viewport as her transport departed the engagement zone. The wreckage was already thinning. Debris shepherded into controlled orbits, space made navigable again. Order restored by those who had broken it most completely. She understood then that defeat was not the worst outcome that council faced. Irrelevance was, as the convoy aligned toward Terran space, the feeds updated with a final tally of requests for protection, each time-stamped and logged. The war had ended. The consequences had not. They were just beginning to compound. The last wreckage was catalogued. Before the alert arrived, human sensors swept beyond the engagement zone in widening shells. Routine now that custody and transit schedules were stable. Deep space arrays, long-tuned for patience rather than speed, listened past the quiet rim where traffic thinned and history grew sparse. For several minutes, nothing changed. Then a return appeared. It was not loud, it did not bloom or flare. It registered as absence regions, where background radiation dropped below modeled baselines, where stars dimmed by fractions too consistent to be natural. The system flagged it without alarm, tagged by an old designation rarely invoked. Anomaly, class, exterminator signature. Distance, 2.1 parsecs beyond mapped space. Vector, inward. Velocity, constant. Human analysts compared the pattern against archive data, some of it centuries old. The match probability climbed past thresholds without hesitation. This was not a fleet in the conventional sense. No drives to read, no emissions to intercept. It was a moving boundary of effect, a front that erased complexity as it advanced. A quiet line appeared on command displays. Confirmed outer rim type. Observers noticed the change in human posture immediately. Ships did not scramble. Weapons did not power up. Instead, long-range relays activated, transmitting compressed data bursts toward Terran space and beyond. Notifications went out to diplomatic channels, to scientific consortia, to defense networks that had not spoken aloud in decades. Punchlines spread more slowly this time, heavier, something older, not a fleet, a final broadcast replaced. Speculation with clarity. Attention, all observers. A non-council threat has been detected beyond the quiet rim. Analysis indicates an extinction-capable phenomenon. Further details will be shared as verification completes. No embellishment. Followed. No reassurance. The galaxy absorbed the words in stunned silence. For many, this was the first time the universe had been framed as dangerous in a way that empires could not administrate. The Council's defeat receded, suddenly small against a horizon that did not negotiate. Human ships resumed movement, not toward retreat, but toward preparation. Some peeled away to escort prisoners and civilians home. Others altered course subtly, orienting toward the rim. Logistics chains adjusted. Production queues updated. The same calm inevitability that had dismantled a fleet now turned outward. Coalition observer requested clarification. Voice careful. United Terran Command, is this threat new? The response took 2 seconds. No, the human voice said. It is intermittent. Intermittent. The implications settled like gravity. This was not a first encounter. It was a recurrence that as data packets flowed. Analysts noted the timestamps embedded in Terran archives prior detections centuries apart. Always beyond the rim, always followed by long quiets. Humanity had not only prepared for conquest, it had prepared for erasure. Slave, watching from custody, understood the final lesson with bitter clarity. The Council had mistaken humans for relics because they fought with old weapons and spoke in old laws. But relics survived up beyond the quiet rim. Something ancient was moving again, indifferent to councils and empires alike. And for the first time, the galaxy knew who would stand in its path, not in panic, not in haste, but ready, as they had been all along.